Yeah, I'm Tige Daane. I'm the technical director for MotoAmerica.
And tell me about what a technical director does in the premier national motorcycle racing.
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out myself, but I'm in charge of managing, enforcing, creation of rules, developing classes, class structures. I'm in charge of performance controls or balance of powers. I'm in charge of anything to do with the motorcycle on the racetrack.
So everyone's always mad at you.
That does come with the territory.
And how long have you been the technical director for MotoAmerica?
4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
And what'd you do before that?
I mean, I've owned a lot of companies. I've been in the motorsports industry for a lot of years. So I've been in the paddock doing crew chief, working as a crew chief for a lot of people. I've had some electronics companies, chassis companies, some.
So you know about putting the 10-foot fuel line on to extend your fuel capacity. You've been on that side of the...
I know a good amount of all of it, and I'm not the best at any of it. How
Excellent.
about that?
That sounds great. That sounds great. What do you guys call it? Performance balancing? Performance indexing?
In Supersport, it's called balance of power.
Balance of power.
Yeah.
Sounds very United Nations. All right, so we're trying to have a balance of power in Supersport.
Yeah, that's the terminology we use.
Tell me a little bit about the history of that.
I mean, the history, how it started.
Sure.
The way it started is FIM. The previous technical director for FIM's named Scott Smart. He came to us and presented this project, and we used to work very close together when he was the technical director for FIM, and so we sat down, we looked at it, we put it all together, presented it to the partners, to the bureau, and said, we want to do this. And everyone was a little bit shocked at first, but took a little coercing to get them to agree to do it, but here we are. You know, it's turned into a pretty successful class.
Very successful. Yeah. And honestly, I was a skeptic.
Me too.
Not that it matters that I was a skeptic, because I'm just some guy, but I was a skeptic, and I've been very impressed with the growth. All right, and if I understand it correctly, you've got the R6, which was kind of the baseline motorcycle in the class that everything else was supposed to sort of get indexed to.
Yeah, so the original balance of power was created based on the World Supersport. So when we first started, we set up two different balancing levels. We created a national and a world, right? So the bike builds were almost similar, but not exactly. So we didn't want to force every single person that had been riding our sixes, which is our almost, you know, the entire paddock, to have to switch over.
4 years ago.
4 years ago, correct. Yep. So we had originally created two levels. So and so when we wrote the Bull Book, we wrote it together, Scott and I, and put it all together, and then we packaged it in two different ways. So we were the national, they were world, and then we would follow as they progress, so to say. So little things have changed, but we're still kind of doing the same thing. So it's been a progression, yeah. So originally, talking about the Yamaha, sorry. Originally, the Yamaha R6 at the time, 4 years ago, was basically, you know, the bike that everyone used. So that would be what's the word I'm looking for?
The foundation.
That would be the target.
Yeah, right, yeah.
The target performance level would have been based on what the best Yamaha R6 could be, and then the rest of the target was based on that at the beginning, and still to this day is still a big part of it. Yes.
And so my basic understanding of it is that the R6, you get, you know, whatever suspension stuff, but it's R6, and you get to port and polish the head. Cams.
And the current spec, yeah, the current spec, the cylinder head, you can, you know, removing material from the cylinder head is open, so you can, like you said, port and polish. You can, before, our spec before that was a standard cylinder head that you could clean up, you could polish the combustion chamber, but you couldn't, you could remove material off the deck, but you couldn't port.
Not the ports.
Yeah, you were able to clean up behind the seats, so they do, because there's a pocket usually back there, so to clean that up, and then we added the entire cylinder head to it. going into last year at Laguna. When we switched, we increased it.
And I mean, to be fair, that Yamaha head is pretty good stock. It's pretty. You got to be pretty good to actually improve upon that thing.
Well, yeah, that was, we've seen, over the last year, we've seen, the progression of the cylinder head.
Right. Because as the bikes get a little faster.
Yeah, as you see the progression of the Yamaha, that's back, to leading the championship this year. So all the engine builders spent a lot of time, and they developed some pretty nice stuff.
And then the 636.
Yep.
They get.
636 currently does not run under a next-gen platform, but it will be required to in 2025.
Do they have a minimum weight?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
And is it bike and rider?
Yeah. So there's a combined weight system that we use in Supersport for all competitors. Doesn't matter what the machine is.
Same number for everybody.
No, the Ducati's different because the Ducati can't get to these numbers. So the Ducatis are higher. The 636 has a little bit more than the Yamaha does, but most of the other ones are the same.
Okay.
But moving forward, there'll be some adjustments going into 2025.
Right, because I mean, honestly, one of the skepticisms I had is there's no way you're going to be able to tweak everything to get such dissimilar bikes racing axle to axle, but you actually did manage to pull off having...
Somehow or another, we've...
I mean, the racing's really close.
It's good racing. Everyone was skeptical at the beginning, and right now in this year it's our biggest class, which is pretty shocking.
And then the GSXR 750, they had to develop an entire electronic throttle valve system for it.
Correct.
And a different ECU, and then you guys, the technical balance limit is throttle plate or rate of change for the ETV?
Yeah, so the 750 has, had to be converted to drive-by-wire. So we got together partners that we work with in Europe, and and Japan did a full homologation, an actual full phase 2 homologation through FIM, and then we created a drive-by-wire system. So we have the grip sensor, we have the whole 9 yards. So at that point, then just like all the other next-gen bikes, the manufacturers create a base file, right? And within that base file, so we call a manufacturer file, then those engines go to Italy, and then what's called a distribution map gets applied. So the distribution map has all the balancing limits in it, which is something that is created by only a couple of us. So Medtronic, the owner of the ECU.
And are the maps that we're using in the US, the power balanced maps we're using in the US are the same that they're using in World?
No. So World has, currently there's 3 levels, there's 3 or 4 levels of balancing. So a couple different series has their own levels. So we have MotoAmerica, World Supersport has their own level, which is a step higher than us, and BSB has their own level, which they have they're all very similar, they're all close, but they all have a little bit different. Going into 26, that's going to change, where we're going to go back to a singular level for all the national series of the world. So I don't get to have my own, or BSB or Spain or any of the other national champions can't create their own balancing levels. It's going to be combined into one. So it's going to make it a little bit easier. It'll be the same rule book, same eligibility of parts, same balancing level. It'll be built the same way. So that's the way we originally designed the class, and then we weren't able to. There was a delay in trying to get it. We wanted to do that in 2024 this year, and weren't able to do that. So going into 25, we're going back to that plan.
Excellent. Then you have a class called Super Hooligan, which by its very name implies rule-breaking outlaw.
Which that's how it started, for sure.
Right, beach racing in California to punk rock concerts, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that's also an incredibly popular class in MotoAmerica. It's huge.
Yeah, it is. It's huge.
Yeah, the grid was enormous.
Yeah.
And it has a ton of different manufacturers in it.
It does.
And the racing up front is also very close.
It is.
Very close.
Yeah.
This year you had a couple of other manufacturers that wanted to participate. And tell me a little bit about the process of a manufacturer that wants to participate in it.
Well, so it depends, right? So like, there's been a couple of bikes that don't maybe conform 100% to the outline of the class as far as the way the rules are designed. So then if that's the case, so the Pan American's a perfect example. So the Pan America, the way, you know, the base of the rules says the claimed manufacturer horsepower can be no more than 125 horsepower. So it has to have high bars, you know. It has to have a few of the basic engine displacements. But other than that, that's the only requirement. That's why bikes that are 20 years old could still potentially fit. You know, I think you see some older Aprilias, some 2004 Aprilias. You know, you see bikes that can still fit within that rule structure. The Pan American bike didn't completely fit within that rule structure because the claimed horsepower on there was well above the claimed horsepower. So we had to come up with a solution. They requested an opportunity to be able to race in this class. So we came up with a solution that we believe would make it as even as possible.
And what was that?
So they have a bike called a Sportster, and that Sportster uses the same engine configuration. So, but they have some different, you know, their claimed horsepower on the Sportster actually fits. So what we did was we took the parts off the Sportster, the restrictions, which had a smaller airbox, had different funnels, and then we did some testing on dynos and went back and forth with some Indians, and we did a bunch of testing, and then came up with a configuration that we felt was reasonable to begin with.
So just to repeat it back to you and make sure I understand it. Horsepower is basically a function of how much air can move through an engine over a fixed amount of time. So either bigger engine or spin it faster. And you said we're going to restrict the intake to the engine to a certain size, and that would help keep that power from that engine from overwhelming the rest of the class.
Yeah, but horsepower is a pretty general term. You know, like, sure, my bike can make this much horsepower, but you know, that doesn't tell us much of the story, right? How long does it take until it gets to peak horsepower? How long can it hold peak horsepower? I mean, there's so much more that goes into looking at this, and so So
who did all of the dyno work and all of that for the Pan America?
Me and Cameron and stuff, and there's a few of us. That
wow. Okay, so it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, to get that bike in was a big deal. Yeah.
What about the KTM?
The KTM fits the rules completely. The reason the KTM was allowed at Mid-Ohio is they wanted to take a look at their new bike that's going to be released soon. Unfortunately, with KTM, they had a delay in the release of that bike. But once the production is released, that bike fits the rules completely. Excellent. So it meets all requirements.
And so this weekend, Tampa Ducati and Warhorse Ducati brought Street Fighters to test in the races.
Yeah.
So they're not really entered in the races, but they're
racing for
provisionally or something.
They're racing for no scoring, no contingency.
And how did that come about?
Well, Ducati had requested the interest in the class, and so it's been a lot about. These talks have been ongoing for a while, until we came up with a scenario that we would say that was reasonable to me, that we could at least take a look at it. So this was the first step. You know, coming up with the platform of how we want to prepare it, how the bikes must be prepared and presented to us was the first step. And now we're taking a look at the racetrack and just getting some real-time views on it, and then we'll do some testing outside of here and do some more dyno testing and some other testing that we'll take a look at to see if it's actually feasible for the bike, for the class long term. That's the cool thing about the Hooligans. It gives us a platform that gives us a little bit, maybe a little bit more room to play with, you know. But, you know, at the same time, you have to understand that there's a lot of other manufacturers that's invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, and and money. And we all know this costs a lot of money to be here and to compete at the highest level. So if you're going to bring in a bike with that type of structure, that's got a lot of Supersport roots that we know what they can do on a Supersport bike, and it's a very similar type platform. We need to make sure that we're get a really good understanding of what.
Right, you don't want it to be an invasive species that pushes everybody else out.
Yeah,
right? You want it to be like a part of the ecosystem that leads to better racing.
Yeah, that's the goal. I don't think anybody would complain.
I would imagine it does lead to a lot of people like yelling at you either way.
I mean, to be fair, I think that we've created a system in there that everyone knows that I'm open to available to talk. And I make myself very available to anybody. So whether it be Harley or Ducati or Yamaha or Suzuki, we have a really open relationship, which I appreciate. Not that everyone always agrees with what I say or I agree with what they say, and my job is to protect the series, protect the racing, make the racing as close as possible, while also protecting each manufacturer and each racer, which is a very difficult decision because one decision may lead. Some people might see that decision as beneficial to one and not as much to other, but the goal in everyone is to try to protect equally everyone, and it's so it does lead to some confrontations.
What's your impression of the Street Fighter in the Hooligan class so far?
I probably don't want to comment too much on that, but I can see a path forward. I have a vision of a path forward I can see. I think some adjustments may need to be made, but I think that I can visualize a path where it could be viable for the series.
So there's a path forward, and there might be some balancing that has to be done to.
There will absolutely be balancing that has to be done. There's no chance. There's no chance it could come in and have the entire rule book. So it would absolutely have some type of balancing situation.
Right, because that's like
currently it has a balancing situation on it right now. So there's a limit to what they were allowed to do to it. We had very controlled. Only this exhaust was allowed to be used. Only this map was allowed to be used. So we have a very controlled environment on it right now, and now we need to understand it a little bit more. So
that's an interesting point because Hooligan, again, with its Outlaw aesthetic,
yes.
Once a bike is homologated, many of the bikes are. It's unlimited modifications once the bike is homologated. Do I have that?
No. There's actually there's a lot of.
So if I want to race a 2004 Tuono,
you could.
That is got performance restrictions, or is it like?
It meets the rule book entirely. Like that particular bike. So when people request a bike they want to race, so a lot of times they'll email me. We don't homologate bikes in the Hooligan class. Does it need? Will we go to that at some point? Yes, but we don't actually do an actual homologation like in all the other classes.
Sure. Okay.
So we more approve whether or not that bike is allowed to be in the class. So we haven't done any full homologation to any of those bikes at this point. It's still rogue, as you could say a little bit, but it's really turning into a really great class, and we just got to get some controls over a few things, but
I mean the racing looks
it's fantastic.
I mean, and I'm a sport bike guy, right? I'm all clip-ons and rear sets, but watching the Hooligan racing, I mean, it looks good.
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved so much in the last 3 years.
They've gotten so fast.
Well, it's not even just
they've dropped like 6 seconds a lap over 4 years or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the Bagger State over their time period. They probably dropped 30.
No, that's probably true.
40. Baggers couldn't.
Well, they don't break anymore.
Touch Twins Cup time for a long time. Yeah. And now they're not even in the same realm.
Right. Yeah.
So now they're getting closer to Supersport times, which is unbelievable. But those guys went and put some homework in, and they did a nice job preparing their motorcycles. The Indians, the Saddlemen bikes, some of the KTM's. At the beginning, like you said, it was a little bit more as you say, outlaw style. And so You know, there was a lot of the Harley style bikes, some of the Dynas, and a lot of cool bikes. There were some great bikes. You know, a couple guys brought some really nice, beautiful air-cooled bikes. You know, there was a lot of different bikes.
There's still a couple air-cooled BMWs today, right?
There's still a couple air-cooled BMWs, but I think a lot of it, you know, has moved more towards, you know, a lot of people see a pathway with the naked bikes, and so a lot of people have gone that direction. So it's really turned into a
right.
really,
Even the Yamaha now.
yeah,
right?
the Yamaha, the inclusion of the triples this last year. We added the triples for this season, up to 900cc triples, if they still meet the other requirements.
And they're not.
There's a lot of
dominating.
triples, like,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of MVs that don't meet the requirement. It would be fantastic to have them. They do have some that do meet the requirements, and they have, you know, others that don't. So, you know, that's still the game plan here, trying to get them to meet the requirements. And the ones that maybe don't, that there's maybe a path forward. The goal is to find a solution where they can compete, as long as it's not ridiculous.
Right. But the goal is to have 6 different manufacturers battling at the front.
Yeah, the goal is to have anybody that wants to be included into the, you know, that anybody that has a product that they believe fits well within this, with this class structure, to be able to find a solution for them to be here, you know, and showcase their product. I mean, that in the end, that's the goal.
And I mean, well-prepared top teams are always going to be out front. I mean, that's just racing.
That's racing.
That's
you know,
racing.
the manufacturer. You know, who the biggest budgets have. You know, they're not the biggest budgets mean that they win. They win because they are able to pay the best tuners, the best riders, the best engine builders, the best electronics guy. You know, and you know, I do find it sometimes funny with the paddock. You know, because you know sometimes picking who's working for who, but it's like in the end, the team's goal is to, like any other team, is to get the best staff, the best thing. It's that's their job to do, and so I love watching it. I love how it plays out. I like watching it. It's interesting.
So even with even at this time, you're still a fan of the racing.
I'm still a huge fan of the racing, but I do have to step back sometimes and just decompress. After a race event, yeah, it takes me a few days to decompress.
I'll bet.
Yeah,
I'll bet.
So you know, people just look at racing, the racing part, but let's be honest. We're an entertainment business. That's what we are, right? So the goal is to get the entertainment out there. So whether it's, you know, online engagement, we do really well. We have a fantastic team that really gets our product out there, and so it's the entire package you have to put together. So the racing, and I think it's just all coming together, and people are seeing a path forward with it. So yeah, it's doing well.
Excellent. All right, well, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.